We come to a conclusion is that people who suffer from certain neurological diseases such as autism and Alzheimer's disease represent a subset of the population that for some reason, possibly genetic, they are unable to get mercury out of their cells. When the mercury gets into their bloodstream, it soaks into the cells immediately, and a healthy person or a person that can get rid of the mercury will combine that with a material in the normal cell and get rid of it, whereas someone who is unable to excrete mercury will retain that mercury and subsequently becomes afflicted.
Placing a mercury filling in my child to me constitutes an assault on my child. We know mercury comes out of these fillings. Other countries have stopped placing these mercury fillings in their children. The United States has an obligation to their children to also stop placing mercury fillings.
Mercury pollution in the environment is becoming a serious global problem, and dentists are a significant contributor to this problem. Every time an amalgam filling is placed or removed in a dental office, mercury is going down the drain, into the sewage system, into the water supply, into the fish that we eat back again. This can be stopped fairly easily. Then dental separator systems in the dental office can cut off this flow of mercury into the wastewater. When this has been done community-wide, such as in San Francisco, it showed that over 90% of the mercury going into the wastewater treatment plants was coming from dental offices.
This mercury fight, and I didn't consider it a fight when I first started. I had no dog in the fight to speak of, but I did do research on Alzheimer's disease and found that mercury would mimic many of the biochemical aberrancies that we see in Alzheimer's disease. By treating it into rats exposed to mercury vapor, or taking normal brain and treating it with mercury, we could create biochemistry that looked very similar to what we see in Alzheimer's disease. So at the very least, you could say that if mercury weren't causal, at least it would be an exacerbating factor for these diseases. Recent research that's come out has supported my concept that mercury is probably fundamentally involved in Alzheimer's disease. I don't think there's much doubt about that. This is not popular with the American Dental Association and even perhaps our Food and Drug Administration dental branch. And you cannot get support for any studies showing that mercury is involved in causation of any neurological disease. The people who fund American research, and this is easy to check out, just go to the literature, almost all the papers that talk about mercury being toxic, neurotoxic, will be submitted from foreign countries. They do have a child study where they're putting mercury in the mouths of children. I would think that they should be very critical, and they're using blood levels of mercury and urine levels of mercury to decide exposure, etc. And what our research on the autistic children shows that means nothing. I mean, children that can't excrete mercury will have low urine, low blood levels, and it will indicate that they are not exposed when indeed they are the ones that are the most susceptible. And I would suggest to people who are learned, go back and look at the Seychelles study, where they looked at mercury in children, in an island where they primarily ate fish. Look at the Faroe Island studies in the North Sea, where they again looked at children who had primarily a diet of fish and whale. And what you will see is that the children with the lowest mercury levels in their hair and blood in those studies were the ones that were the most adversely affected, whereas the children with the highest level in their hair and blood were the ones that were the least affected. What this means is that the children who are effectively excreting the mercury, are getting better and are not getting sick, whereas the children who can't excrete it are the ones that are having medical problems and neurological problems. Removing amalgams does make the population in general healthy. And when the ADA says there's no correlation between amalgam placement, amalgam existing in your mouth, and poor health, they're just ignoring the literature that they don't want to look at. Because you understand, Alzheimer's disease, autism, ALS, MS, Parkinson's are all major diseases that we haven't a clue about what causes them. We have no absolute proof. And it's not because we can't intellectually figure that out. It's because we are not given the funding to pursue the fact that maybe heavy metal toxicity, predominantly mercury toxicity, is the cause of these illnesses.
These instructions can be found on the webpage of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. I would recommend that you review them and have your dentist do the same before commencing any procedures involving mercury.